Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. She forced him to play the piano, but his genius silenced the entire room. The restaurant, the grand opus, wasn't just a place to eat. It was a temple of refinement, a sanctuary reserved for the powerful. Located on the top floor of a glass-enclosed skyscraper overlooking Central Park, it offered a breathtaking view of the lights of Manhattan. Inside, everything exuded controlled excess, columns of gold-veined Italian marble, of the soft Persian rugs under the feet, baccarat crystal chandeliers suspended at more than 5 meters in height, and dark oak walls decorated with contemporary works of art of unacknowledged value. The waiters glided silently between the pure white-clothed tables, like elegant ghosts, trained never to meet anyone's gaze for too long. People didn't come here just to dine. They came to affirm one simple, but pitiless, point: I'm at the top. And you? That evening, everything shone even brighter. Charity Gala, officially in support of artistic education in disadvantaged neighborhoods, brought together the East Coast elites. In reality, it was a social theater where everyone came to show off their influence, their network, and their millions. The discussions revolved around corporate mergers, tax reforms, islands bought off the Mediterranean coast, and sometimes, on the fringes, the children they claimed to be helping. In the center of one of the most prominent tables was Madison Whitmore. Harrison Whitmore's only daughter, a Texas oil tycoon, Madison had grown up in the lap of luxury like others in the air. Platinum blonde, blood-red lips, gaze sharp as a blade. Her dress, Chanel tailor-made, a deep black, revealed a necklace of antique diamonds. On his wrist shone a Cartier watch whose price was equivalent to the annual salary of a high school teacher. She ruled her table with cruel ease. Her voice carried. Her mockery was sharp. She alternated between biting remarks about other women's dresses, elitist jokes about the poor New Yorkers on the subway, and scathing comments about the restaurant staff. Honestly, the champagne is lukewarm. I need to talk to someone. What's the point of pretending to care for the poor if we can't even serve the rich properly? Laughter around her. Servile. Hypocritical. She loved it. It is at this moment that Elijah Turner entered the burning aura of this table. 32 years old, tall, slender, deep brown skin, straight figure despite the long hours of work. His hair was short, his features calm, but his gaze, although lowered, betrayed intense concentration. He wore the black uniform of the grand opus like armor, tailored jacket, impeccable white shirt, white gloves who seemed almost too noble to carry plates. He walked silently, tray in hand, towards Madison. With a fluid gesture, he placed a finely decorated plate in front of her, sole filet with black truffles, parsnip puree, lime espuma. He was about to leave, but she didn't move. She stared at him. Her smile widens, mocking, almost playful, but of a dangerous game, that of the predator who has just smelled prey. Wait a second, Madison Whitmore said, narrowing her eyes, her gaze fixed on Elijah's hands, as if she had just discovered an exotic curiosity. She tilted her head, her smile twisting into icy irony. Your hands, they're too thin for a waiter. Are you a pianist or something? Elijah stopped dead in his tracks. The tray in his hands suddenly felt heavier. He stood frozen for a moment, the words caught between his throat and his duty of confidentiality. Silence fell briefly around the table. He felt eyes focused on him like spotlights, and an unpleasant shiver ran down his spine. Then, calmly, with the steady voice of one who has learned to survive without defending himself, he replied. I studied piano once. He said nothing more. His answer was brief, modest, almost invisible. He knew that in this kind of place, every word too many was a mistake. But the statement had the effect of a spark. A burst of laughter immediately erupted, too loud, too theatrical, from a man sitting to Madison's left, a real estate mogul whose gold watch glittered as much as his ego. A pianist waiter. New York will always surprise us. Madison burst into a more refined, controlled, almost cruel laugh. She turned to her guests, her arms half raised as if she were about to put on a show. But this is wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, we happen to have an artist among us. And there just happens to be a piano over there. She gestured gracefully toward the large black grand piano, set near the bay window, beneath a beam of soft light. It sat there, unused, almost forgotten by the professional musicians who sometimes entertained at social gatherings. Go ahead, Elijah. Show us what you can do. Make us dream. His words flowed like honey, poisoned. It wasn't an invitation. It was a hidden order. An impromptu diversion. A way to uproot from one's dignity to offer it as fodder to people who felt above him, simply because they were dining in a gilded room. She wanted him to make a spectacle of himself. Like a servant in an old movie. Elijah felt his jaw tighten. For a second, the urge to say no, to turn away, to throw down his apron, crossed his mind like a blade. But he changed his mind. He knew what it would cost him. Immediate dismissal. Perhaps even the wrath of the owner, who saw each evening as a perfect ballet where everything had to remain fluid, polite, and silent. And then, deep inside him, an older, more intimate voice whispered an unexpected truth. Perhaps it wasn't a humiliation. It was an opening. Not for her. Not for the table. But for himself. Then Elijah nodded slowly. He silently placed the tray on a nearby console, under the curious and already amused gaze of the guests. His footsteps echoed lightly on the marble floor. He crossed the room slowly, head erect, back straight, gloved hands at his sides. As he approached the piano, the murmur of conversation faded. There was whispering, sniggering. Some were discreetly filming him. Others were expecting an awkward, pitiful moment, a few clumsy notes. He arrived in front of the instrument. A. Steinway and Sons, lacquered black, perfectly matched. He sat down, without rushing. He didn't look at the room. He closed his eyes. He placed his fingers on the keys. And he played. It was not just a piece of music. It was acre from the soul, and silent song that words could never contain. It was the story of a life compressed in the thrill of the keys, released in the space of an instant. Elijah played like one breathes after a long apnea. Like a man who was never allowed to fully exist, and who, suddenly, no longer waits for permission. His fingers danced with supernatural ease. He didn't read any music. He told his music carried the elegance of Chopin, the depths of Rachmaninoff, but also the poignant identity of a jazz born in the dark alleys of Harlem, this music that weeps and resists, that heals and uplifts. Each note carried the weight of his accumulated silences, the years spent being ignored, undervalued, reduced to a function, never a story. It was the controlled anger of a boy told to stay in his place. It was the tenderness of a son playing for his ailing mother on an old, out-of-tune piano. It was the raw beauty of a black man transforming pain into light. The room, at first curious, became attentive. Then silent. The cutlery stopped clinking. Conversations gradually faded. Champagne glasses remained suspended in hands. The waiter stopped mid-movement, as if frozen in a living painting. The head waiter, usually obsessed with the perfect mechanics of service, leaned against a wall, mouth half open. Even those who had never really listened to classical music felt deep down, without understanding scales or tones, they recognized a universal truth: suffering. Hope. Humanity. And in the center of this room, which has become a sanctuary, Elijah Turner, a simple waiter with white gloves, silently rewrote his own legend. Sitting at her table, Madison Whitmore no longer smiled. His face had frozen. His features tense. One hand gripped the stem of his champagne glass. His eyes, initially mocking, had narrowed, betraying a newfound unease. She was no longer the mistress of the game. In a few minutes, the man she had wanted to humiliate had risen well above from her, without saying a word, without insulting her, without responding to her contempt. He had done what she did not understand, he had transcended. She, who believed she could buy everything, control everything, found herself a spectator of a power that no fortune can grant. Greatness without costume. The genius without pedigree. Then came the last note. A long breath. Suspended. As if the piano itself were holding its breath. Elijah didn't move right away. His hands remained on the keys for a moment. He kept his eyes closed, absorbed in a world no one could ever take from him. Finally, he raised his eyelids. Slowly. He stood up. Adjusted his gloves. And, without a bow, without a word, without a glance at the room, he turned on his heels, and calmly went back to the kitchen. He had come in silence. He was leaving as a king. And then an unexpected noise was heard behind him. A chair pushed back. Then another. Then another. The whole room stood up as if spellbound. Not an automatic, social ovation. No. A standing ovation, sincere. Deep. Visceral. Guests who usually wouldn't applaud anyone without an official title stood tall, hands clapping loudly, sometimes with tears in their eyes. Powerful men, arrogant women, jaded critics. All united by something greater than themselves, the truth of a man who had just reminded them that they were alive. And in the midst of all this, Madison Whitmore, frozen, unable to get up. She had come to rule a room. That evening, she attended a coronation, but it wasn't his. As he was about to cross the discreet door that led to the kitchens, trying to find the shadows again after having dazzled the light, Elijah Turner heard hurried footsteps behind him. Mr. Turner. He turned around, slightly surprised. A slender figure was approaching quickly, visibly out of breath but determined. Black suit, simple tie, piercing gaze behind thin glasses. The man held out his hand, his eyes shining with emotion. I'm sorry to stop you like this. My name is Daniel Everett. I conduct the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. Elijah nodded slightly, still restrained. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that, with respect, with admiration. What you just played, Daniel searched for words, his hands shaking. It wasn't just beautiful. It was alive. Real. You didn't just play music. You transformed that room into a cathedral. I saw people cry, Mr. Turner. And I, too, was touched. Deeply. Elijah looked down for a moment, unsettled. Part of him wanted to believe this moment. Another part was still wary, out of reflex, out of experience. Daniel felt the silence, and continued gently. Where did you learn to play like that? Elijah looked up at him slowly. Her voice, when she answered, was calm, but heavy with memories. In Harlem. I was 9 years old. My mother was a nurse. She worked day and night for months to give me an old upright piano she found at a thrift store. It was rickety, some keys didn't work. But to me, it was a treasure. He paused, his gaze lost in a fragment of childhood. Then I taught myself. During the day, I delivered groceries. At night, I sat and played. Every time I pressed a key, I forgot everything that hurt. It was my way of breathing. Daniel listened to him, fascinated. He could see that this young man was not trying to impress. He spoke as one confides a secret. You have a gift, Elijah. What you did tonight isn't something you can teach. It was born within you. It's rare. Priceless. He took a card out of his pocket and handed it to her gravely. Here's my home address. I want you at my studio, Monday at 9 a.m. Not for a trial. Not for a class. To get started. Your place isn't behind a set. Your place is in a stage. In front of orchestras. In front of the world. Elijah was silent for a moment. He looked at the map, then at Daniel. A dull emotion rose within him, uncontrollable, powerful. How long had it been since he'd been seen? Really seen? Not as an employee, not as a good guy, but as a rare being. A musician. A man with a fire in his heart. His lips trembled slightly, but he recovered. He took a deep breath. Thank you, Mr. Everett. Really? I'll be there. Daniel smiled. Not a worldly smile. A genuine, almost relieved smile. Perfect. See you Monday then. And Elijah, he added before leaving, get ready. Your life is about to change. Elijah looked at the map for a long time. The cooking sounds outside the door seemed distant, almost unreal. He had just crossed an invisible border. And for the first time in a long time, he felt that his future was no longer locked within the walls of this room, but open, immense, infinite, like a score still blank, ready to be written. 2 years later, Lincoln Center, New York. The great concert hall at Lincoln Center shone like a jewel under the 1,000 dim lights that cascaded down from the upper balconies. The red armchairs were all occupied, closed ticket offices, for several weeks. The name in capital letters on the poster at the entrance left no doubt, Elijah Turner, solo piano recital. The audience that evening wasn't just composed of discerning music lovers. There were renowned critics, famous artists, influential patrons, and music students from all over the country. And also, a crowd of people who, touched by the story of a former waiter turned virtuoso, had lined up in the rain to be there. On stage, a shiny black Steinway, still, ready. Waiting for a master's touch. Then the light faded. The room held its breath. And Elijah Turner enters. A sober costume, without extravagance. His bearing was dignified, poised, almost sacred. He bowed briefly, then sat down at the piano, without seeking the audience's gaze. He didn't come to seduce. He came give. When he placed his hands on the keys, the silence became religious. And he played. He was no longer the Harlem kid fumbling over a rickety keyboard. He was no longer the waiter humiliated by a smile that was too rich. He was no longer even the man saved by an opportunity. It was a master of his art, a messenger of emotions. He played as one breathes life itself. Through the sounds he wove, Elijah summoned the memory of his mother, the cold nights without heating, the forbidden dreams he had cradled in the kitchen corridors. But he also offered the beauty of a triumph without revenge, of a light born of silence. The room vibrated, some cried silently. Others closed their eyes, as if to listen better with their souls. In the first row, right, a woman sitting upright did not take her eyes off him. Madison Whitmore. Still elegant. Still rich. But this time, her face displayed neither contempt, nor pride, nor irony. Just silence. A troubled silence. 2 years earlier, she had summoned him to the piano as one would summon a servant. She had laughed at the thought of him as clumsy and ridiculous. But tonight, that same man filled a room where she herself was just one spectator among others. And in this room, there was no longer any hierarchy, there was only the truth of art, and a man who embodied it. When Elijah played the last note, long, deep like a prayer to the whole world, he didn't move immediately. He stood there for a moment, his fingers still on the keyboard. As if he were listening to music that only he could hear. Then he raised his head. Stood up. And bowed. The room exploded. A thunderous applause, a standing ovation, immediate, unanimous, infinite. People stood up as one. Some shouted, "Bravo," at the top of their lungs, others stood there with tears in their eyes, unable to speak. The most austere critics rose first. Professional musicians applauded him as one would greet an equal. And in this sea of amazed faces, no one was looking at Madison Whitmore. She, that was usually listened to in every room she entered, was invisible. That evening, the spotlight wasn't for her. She received no applause. But Elijah had them all. And through every clap, every heartfelt shout, it was more than an artist being acclaimed. It was a man who had never stopped believing, despite everything, a man who had been tried to be reduced, but who, instead of defending himself, had transcended. And this is precisely what makes the difference between power and greatness.